Hey everybody, welcome back to the Human Challenge, where we explore all the human challenges in today's world, the challenges of being human, and how we can challenge ourselves to be more human for the greater good. I'm your host, Vanessa Ferlano, and today we are going to be talking about citizen science, a term I've never heard of, and I think it's just fascinating. And we're going to be talking about Wings of Survival, a groundbreaking expedition initiated by Dr. Timm Döbert, a ecologist and explorer, and Leanna Carriere, an extreme endurance athlete, who in June 2024 are setting out on a self-powered 30,000 kilometer expedition across the Americas through the westernmost migratory bird flyway, which we will learn what all those words mean in just a second. Here, really to raise awareness around the biodiversity crisis, advancing environmental science, and mobilizing action for nature conservation. So I welcome both Dr. Dobert, Timm, and Leanna to the show. Thank you both so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
And so I want to start because you both obviously have very different backgrounds. And so I am very curious how you guys came together to pull this huge initiative off. And I know we're still kind of early. I know you still got till June. But these kinds of things take time. So maybe Timm, tell us a bit about your background, really how it suits you, what you're trying to accomplish with it.
Yeah, so I'm a scientist, and I'm an explorer. So I've been a member of the Explorers Club for a long time, liaising with some of the most accomplished explorers, and listening and learning about so many amazing projects. And for a long time, I've tried to carve out my own project and wondered what could it be? What could I do in life that's very impactful, that's meaningful, bringing together all my talents, my skills. What's it going to be? And then at some point, about 2.5 years ago, I came across this map by BirdLife International, and it depicts those migratory bird flyways. So these are corridors, and they connect the different hemispheres. So it's a simplification, but it's a concept of how birds migrate across the seasons, looking for driven by resource availability. And it just immediately clicked. And I thought, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to traverse all these 8 flyways in the next 20 years. I'm going to retire now. That's the long-term goal. So that's really how it started for me. And yeah, it very much aligned with what Leanna is thinking to do. So yeah, that's my starting point.
And so you said, so you're a scientist, you're an ecologist. What did you study? And can you tell us a little bit more about migratory flyways? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I've been very fortunate to study tropical ecology. So I've spent about 3 years living in a hammock in Borneo, totally immersed in the rainforest, looking at human impacts on how ecosystems change, the impacts on animals. I lived in Thailand for many years, again, studying something similar in the context of forest fragmentation, splitting forests into smaller islands, so to speak, and what's the implications on ecosystems. That's sort of my graduate study background. And then I came to Canada, where I'm living right now. I've been researching grassland ecosystems here. Again, context of biodiversity, carbon, and the birds are something I've always been interested in, but not more interested than mammals and insects, just any creature in a way. So birds are, I wouldn't say random, but it's just by chance that it happens to be birds in this project. And so chance for me, but it makes a lot of sense if we look at the ecology and the migration of birds, because they're literally connecting all the continents, the countries, the communities, individuals. So that makes them a really powerful group of animals to study. And there's about 10,000 species. So it's not overwhelming, if you know what I mean. That's and they're not as elusive as mammals. So people get to see them, people get to experience them, and it's in a way creating this opportunity for each and every country or community to be engaged. So it's both. It's an opportunity and it's a responsibility that's shared across every corner of the planet, really. So birds are perfect for being a hook for a conservation project.
Right. That's very interesting. Actually, I really appreciate that perspective. And I think we'll get into it a little bit later. But I do really appreciate that perspective of almost a symbolism of birds, like their importance in the natural ecosystem. I mean, I know the relationship between like the health of the planet and the health of ourselves, and I think we'll get into that a little later. But before we do, I want to just jump over quickly to Leanna. You know, what's your side of the story? What's your version here?
Yeah, it's slightly different. We come from different backgrounds. Been an athlete for a very long time. My focus was always trying to get that Olympic spot, and I missed it in 2016. I was a pole vaulter for Canada, competed a couple international events, and then I also became Canada's first female decathlete in, I think that was 2015, and I won a Women of Vision Awards for that. So I was an athlete, and then I had my daughter, and I think like most athletes, you kind of struggle with finding that, what do we do now? What's my purpose now? Because for years and years and years, I'd be planning my life on these 4-year cycles. So after having my daughter, I dived into the world of endurance sport, which has taken me all over the place racing. I raced Mount Everest Marathon, in Patagonman Xtreme triathlon, a few other Ironmans, and just fell in love with being outside, running in the trails, swimming in the rivers, being on my bike and having that sense of just freedom and flying, kind of like pole vault, which I love. And then I met, or through COVID, races had been canceled and everything. So I was outside a lot training during COVID, and I just felt so connected in nature, and I really enjoyed that passion and to share that with other people. And during a race, we were 2 weeks out of a big race, Ironman Canada, and it got canceled. And I was so frustrated because I've been working so hard. So I saw that there was a record attempt on this Pan American Highway, which basically follows the Pacific Flyway. And so I started researching a bit and saw that there was record attempts, and I thought to myself, I can do this. No female's done this yet or established a record. So I kind of had this in the back of my mind, and I met Timm and showed him the map, and he had been thinking, I guess, similar thoughts about following a certain path, but for different reasons. So we kind of came together, and he said, yeah, I'll ride that, which again, I don't think you can find many people that are willing to ride 30,000 kilometers with you. So I was surprised. He's like, yeah, but I think I have a better idea, or kind of a more purposeful reason to ride this highway. And he shared so much information over the last 2.5 years with me, and it's been quite a learning and a transition phase for myself. And it's just so exciting how this project is now growing. And for me, I love inspiring and empowering. So I just love every bit of this project, and more kind of connection we can have with each other through the natural world, through sports, through science, and really thinking without borders and coming together to improve the health of each other and the planet.
Right. I mean, I love a lot of those words, bringing like communities together, people together, thinking without borders. I think that's really, they're like purposeful, right? Very impactful, very purposeful. What was I going to ask you here? So 2 years it took. You've been talking about this for 2 years. I actually thought this was like a very recent thing, but so this has been 2 years in the making so far, planning this out. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. But it's going by really fast. When you say that, oh, you have a lot of time in June, I'm secretly having a panic attack.
That's fair. I guess for me, it's like lots of time, but yeah, you're like, yeah, I can appreciate that. So, but have you been training for this for 2 years though?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of who we both are is always being active and healthy. So we're never not cycling. Like we're always active and doing some sort of fun adventure. We just got back from Morocco. We've done a couple of backpacking trips to Patagonia, and then some races. So I think expressing ourselves on the physical side is definitely very important to me, and I think it is for Timm as well. So yeah, it's just part of who we are. It's our lifestyle. So we'll get more bike fit as it goes, but we're always on our bikes.
As much as you can in Edmonton, yes.
Yeah, true. And so then the other thing I wanted to talk about was I know I mentioned in my intro the term citizen science, and I know that Tim, you were telling us about it like just before we hopped on. And so can you tell us a little bit more about it, and I guess why it's important, and how the Wings of Survival is, or how it's a part of Wings of Survival, I should say.
Yeah, so really the motivation here is what we're trying to achieve is revolves around this idea of how do you get people who normally don't gravitate towards conservation, nature, birds.
Right.
How do you get those people on board, right? Because eventually it has to be a concerted effort across the globe. If we want to try and fix all the different crises that we're facing, and we're not just talking about biodiversity and climate change, obviously, it's a lot of social or socio-economic problems, crises that fit right in. It's all interconnected. So how do we win people, basically, and not just keeping it within your circle all the time? Because yes, people are going to give you likes if they like birds, but how do you get those people who don't know much about birds, who don't know that birds migrate? And so that's really fundamentally what underpins this mission. How do you capture different audiences? So what we're going to do is we're going to put some little GPS devices, and they're really, really tiny, on several birds up in the high Arctic. And that allows us to track the journeys of those birds, which takes several months, and all the way down to Patagonia, ideally, if the birds collaborate. So we're going to pick some species which do go all the way, right? So, but you still never know. The birds are obviously, they make their own choices. So we don't know if they're going to go all the way to Patagonia.
Birds
They might stop in Colombia because they like it. We really don't know, but this is the idea. We want to create suspense, a story arc based on the birds' journeys and our journeys. And we're going to use, tracking technology that's available to us as well. And that's how we want to reach virtual audiences. So having this parallel journey, we're all going to face the same obstacles. It's the same fundamental ideas of what do we eat, where do we sleep, are we safe, where we stop. So really we become ambassadors to the birds. We're just being catalysts for something much bigger, because we believe it's so essential to have a human component to make people understand nature much better. Because it's this struggle which I've been facing as a scientist, where you do your scientific work, and say you're living in the rainforest for a few years, and you create scientific papers, but then what, right? It's just not taken up by anyone. So it's, in a way, it just sits there without any application. So numbers are always a struggle, right? How do we get beyond numbers? How do we make people feel, right? It has to be a heartfelt decision. Otherwise it can come through policy perhaps, but you really want to win people by heart, by emotion. So once you bring in the human component, it's much easier for people to understand, or at least to have a feeling. Cycling from Alaska to Patagonia, it's going to trigger something, right? Crazy, insane, amazing, some kind of response. But if you say a bird is flying from Alaska to Tasmania to New Zealand, which birds do, which is utterly out of this world, right? If you think about it from a human perspective, but how do you get this message across? And I believe there's so much potential to bring in sports, bring in adventure, arts as well, photography, different types of arts. It's essential, basically. It's essential to get the message across. So this is what we're creating. So when we talk about citizen science, it's this opportunity to engage people, right? To make people feel. So people say they might be interested in birds in this context, and they're always observing birds, and they're writing down the names, and there's potential for contributing this to scientific studies. So this is a wonderful way for people to feel we are part of a bigger puzzle piece. We're just small, but we're contributing something that's for a larger endeavor. So this is where and citizen science is really powerful in the bird space. So there's something called eBird, and they've had, I don't know, I don't want to get the number wrong, but let's say 1 billion submissions since I think it's been initiated around 2000, so it's been out there for 20 years. It's an app, and you can record your sightings, and scientists literally use this for publishing papers in Nature and Science, so in the top journals, because it's such powerful information. And now there's technologies where we can use sound, for example, so people can identify species just by recording sound. So there's different apps, so lots of space for getting people engaged and involved. And like Leanna said, it's this idea of conservation or working together across borders. We're all part of a bigger mission.
That's very fascinating. I mean, I think this idea of just engaging with the general public and making us all a part of science, right? In a way. And it's not even just science, it's like this adventure, right? This Pan-American trek that I can be a part of and not have to ride 30,000 kilometers. So I have to say, I'm okay with that. I am okay with that. And then the last piece here is, I guess, restoring this connection to the natural world. And I think you both kind of touched on it, right? Like, maybe can we dive a little more into how birds are kind of symbolic of that? I think one of you mentioned earlier that birds are one of the like a strong indicator, I think it was, of the health of the planet. Like, yeah, I would love to learn a little more about that.
Yeah, so I think for myself, not being a scientist and kind of learning about this, that's what's great. You can always be learning. Learning about the importance of the birds and why I get asked that, well, why the birds? And the biggest thing is the birds provide a good indicator for the health of the environment. So if the birds are declining in a certain area, then we know there's something wrong with the environment or something could be improved. If you're protecting the birds, you're protecting the land. And the birds, as Timm mentioned, they fly all over. There's no borders. So for instance, actually here in Edmonton, they'd taken away Horlock Park. So all the geese migrating came to their home that they've come for the last how many years, and they don't have a home now. Right. So there's these instances where this is happening, and we have to look why. And as a community, we have to figure out how we can protect the birds and also the lands. And there's lots of different ways, I think, of doing that depending where you are. So I think the birds represent, again, kind of hope and endurance and vulnerability. And hopefully we'll be able to showcase this through our documentary and get people to kind of step outside their doors and join eBird, or and that's something free. I didn't know about these things. So I didn't realize how important the birds were to the health of the environment, but really kind of finding that connection to nature again, because I think all of us nowadays have experienced or seen some sort of terrible event, whether it's kind of the fires have been really bad in Alberta and BC this year, all over the world. But it's heartbreaking to see when I'm riding my bike now and I see just these forests. When I was a kid, they were big and green and luscious, and now they're gone, or it's taking my daughter to the ocean and I can't find a starfish for her to see. And when I was a kid, they were there, and trying to build a healthier future for everyone.
Right. Timm, did you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, maybe there's a metaphor of, there's canary in the coal mine, and that's really what migratory birds are. What those canaries used to be to coal mining. They're such a good indicator. And I'd add it's really this idea of nudging people. So we don't want to impose something on people, right? We don't want to say you have to do this or you have to do that because we're in trouble planetary with the planet. It's really nudging people to change their perception, because I feel from a personal point of view, sometimes it doesn't take much. You just have to hear about something. You just have to see something. It's this planting a seed or this trigger which can really lead to your own change. Everybody has to come to their own conclusion, right? You don't want to enforce on people. So I think because we're developing this cohesive story where we can't talk about our adventure without talking about the birds, it's really nudging something in people. And then you build in those cool linkages where we have a scientist on board who's going to study our physiological resilience. Obviously, there's going to be sunny days, but there's going to be lots of rainy days too. So it does something to you on a physical, but obviously just as much, if not more, in a mental space. So we're going to have a scientist who's going to study this, and then we're also going to study physiology and physical components of how do we change, how do we adapt, what's our resilience, and there's a lot of studies on the birds, so we can cross compare. Again, it's this idea of storytelling, right? How do you build those connections between us and the birds, which then makes people realize I might be the best endurance athlete on the planet. Compared to a bird, I'm just being dwarfed here. This bird is flying 11 days, 15,000 kilometers in one go. And in that process, the bird is changing its physiology completely, shrinking its stomach, building its respiratory system to maybe twice the size, things we are just not capable of. So it's really getting people fascinated.
Wow. That's very fascinating. And it sounds like it's a very humbling experience, I think, too. Is kind of what you're describing. Like, we think we're like so great as human beings, but then I think doing something like this, like alongside nature, alongside other like species, right? It's like this experience of like, wow, there's so much wonder, in the world around
Mhm.
us, so much more beyond just us. And I think messages like that are just very important, because as humans we get so caught up in like our stuff, we just miss the truth of the world, the beauty of the world. And, so I really love that message.
So how do we become stewards more than dominators, right? How do we become part of nature? How do we look after other species? I think that's fundamentally where we need to evolve to as humankind,
Yeah,
feeling responsible for everything else.
right. Or like we're part of that, like that co-creation, right? Like we're part of that all
Mhm.
together.
Mhm.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think, we talk about the human challenge, the human experience, right? It's that, how do we challenge ourselves to think that way? And yeah, I absolutely love that. So you mentioned then that you're going to be documenting, filming. So how do we keep in touch with you throughout this journey until June, which is not so far away? Just recorrecting, but I don't want to stress anybody out either. So I'm just gonna until June. So how do we follow you? Until June, and then like after June, like how do we follow you? How do we support? Let us know.
Yeah. So everything's on our website, www.wingsofsurvival.com. You can find us also on Instagram at Wings of Survival. And yeah, follow our journey there. Even just a follow is a way of supporting, so that's great. You'll listen to all of our podcasts and media stuff. It's all on the website, as well as you can subscribe to our newsletter as well.
Awesome. I will be subscribing to the newsletter because I want to follow this. Just not on my bike. I have a Da Vinci hatchet. I love my bike.
Oh, nice.
It's
Those are
beautiful.
nice.
It's a bright red, like she's a nice, but I don't
Yeah.
want to ride her 30,000 kilometers.
No. Trek actually gave us aluminum bikes, so they're a little bit hardier.
Ooh,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right.
With,
Well, thank you. Oh,
but
sorry. Go
but
ahead.
you are based in the Flyway, right? Are you in California?
So I go back and forth. Right now, I'm in Northern Ontario. Am I part of a flyway? Am I part of any flyway?
Yes. Everyone's a part of a flyway.
No excuses here for not riding.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I will support, I will donate, but maybe I'll fly to the finish line. Maybe I'll be happy to welcome you there. All right, well, thank you both for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm going to share all the links as well in the description. Please follow them both and please support. And I'm very excited to follow you guys. Really, I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Take care.